We have a regular Eurovision now, regular annual, believe it or not, our house, and we have a complicated scoring system. And on the scoring system, if there's a win machine, you will have to get 5 points. So I'm feeling this morning like I'm coming up here. Thanks to Hayden's Pat, which is lovely. So it's a pleasure. Pause there. Tell you more about Eurovision. Yeah. Is it the microphone's problem? Is it good? We're good. Okay, great. So as I was saying, the charity that we led sadly closed at the end of December, which was an incredibly difficult time. So I'm just going to share some lessons that I've learned through that and some reflections on that, which is what I've been asked to do this morning. So we're going to start by looking at God's word, and we're looking at Matthew. I didn't write the reference down. What's there? Matthew 7. Great. So it says, anyone who listens to my teaching and follows it is wise, like a person who builds a house on solid rock. Though the rain comes in torrents and the floodwaters rise and the winds beat against that house, it won't collapse because it's built on bedrock. But anyone who hears my teaching and doesn't obey it is foolish, like a person who builds a house on sand. When the rains and winds come when the rains and floods come and the winds beat against that house, it will collapse with a mighty crash. So any of you that grew up in Sunday school probably know this parable, probably through a little song. Can anyone remember the song? Wise men built is. Exactly. I'm not going to sing the whole thing, but you remember it. I've had it in my head all week. You might be surprised to learn. It's a straightforward idea, isn't it? It's quite a simple parable. It wasn't one of the more complicated ones that Jesus used and taught with. You know, in this metaphor, the house is our life, and the rock is Jesus. That's a solid, firm foundation, and the sand represents building a life on anything other than Jesus. And everything else is movable and shakeable and changing. And the only thing we can say with absolute certainty that will still be there is that rock. So what does it look like to have a house or a life that is built on the rock and not the sand? So over the years, there are some things that I feel like I got right, some things that I probably got wrong, and some things that I've learned along the way. And I do want to say right from the start, we are all a work in progress, and it takes deep, tiring foundations, difficult decisions often to build a life on the rock. And it won't just happen overnight, and it takes deliberate living, good decisions, and a lot of sacrifice. The sand is often a quick, easy win. It's cheap, and you can decide at the end of this whether you think that I think it's worth building on the rock. So here's some things that I think it means to build your life on the rock. Number one, your identity is rooted in Jesus, not achievements or outputs. If you ever accidentally press my identity button, I will monologue at you for an unknown amount of time, and there's no stop button. This is something that that matters to me a lot, and I've got to somehow speak about it in about three minutes. And this is first and foremost the most important thing a life built in Jesus has. It determines everything. You cannot build a life on the rock if your identity is not rooted firmly in Jesus. In Ephesians 1, verse 4 to 5, it says, even before he made the world, God loved us and chose us in Christ to be holy and without fault in his eyes. God decided in advance to adopt us into his own family by bringing us to himself through Jesus Christ. This is what he wanted to do, and it gave him great pleasure. God chose you. So this verse teaches us that God chose you. Even before he made the world, he wanted us to be holy and blameless in his eyes. He decided before you even existed that he wanted to adopt you into his family. He chose you personally, his child, and all of the inheritance that goes with it. And the thing about a child of the king is there's confidence, isn't there? There's a security. There's an anointing and an entitlement. There's royal robes and inheritance that goes with that. Just imagine for a second how we might live differently if you lived every moment of every day knowing that you are a prince or princess, what you are to inherit, who your father is. And so often we forget that, don't we? How many times do we fail to do stuff because we're scared of failure? We don't even start because we're scared of what the outcome might be, or we're scared of what people might think or say. If you're a child of the king, if God is for you, how can you possibly fail? Surely the only way that you can fail is to not try in the first place. If you're obedient to what is asked, it can't go wrong. It's not your problem anymore, it's his. Your part is done. The results are not your problem, the outcomes are not your problem, the failures aren't yours, but neither are the successes either. Our problem is obedience. The only problem when you got up this morning was obedience. What has God asked me to do today? We live for an audience of one. So why do we care so much what other people think? What are we worried about? When God says, I want you to do this thing for me, how it works, if it works, that's his problem. My problem is that he just wants me to be a kid that does his thing with him. Imagine a parent giving a child a job. So can you run to the shop for me and get, I don't know, an onion or something? Simple task. Can you imagine how that parent would feel if the child said, no, I can't do that. I can't go. What if I get there and there are no onions and I fail? It doesn't matter, does it? The parent would be like, it doesn't matter. If you get there, there's no onions. You've not let me down. There's no onions. Like your job as a child is to just do what your parent has asked. The outcome, whether you succeed or whether you fail, it's not your problem. It's your parents' problem. We need a revelation, a fresh revelation. We need to seek God to remember and understand who we are as his kids. Once we grasp that, once we grasp that we are his, that we are children of the living God, that fear of failure and that fear of man that grips so many of us, it just fades away. Success or failure isn't actually relevant. Obedience becomes the main thing. Number 2, a shift from control to trust. Anyone else here a control freak? 2 hands from Melissa. Yeah, especially the women. It's quite hard not to be, isn't it? It's something in our DNA. Just kind of, we're just built that way a little bit. And yet, a life built on the rock has to see a shift from control to trust in God. It has to. In 2022, we were struggling as a charity. We hit a bit of financial challenges after the pandemic, and we reopened and things like that. And I spent some time seeking God over the solution. Like, God, we just need to make more money. What can I do? We just need to make more money. And he said, make it free. And I went, what? What? How does that help? Just take the bit of money we have got coming in and get rid of it. Yeah, genius, that is. And I couldn't shake it. He kept saying, no, make it free. So I took it to the trustees. It was a huge gamble. It makes no sense. Business-wise and world-wise, it makes no sense. And we tried it. We made the Hideaway free with an option of donating. And what happened was that so many more thousands of people visited. People gave, they donated, lots more people came and used the cafe. And over the next 12 months, we generated 35% more income than we had done previously. 35% it went up by making it free. Business-wise, makes no sense. But actually, that shift from, for me, from controlling every little aspect to letting God, trusting God when he said, make it free, and it makes no sense, save the charity that year. I've repeatedly, so I learned that lesson, and then probably about 5 minutes later, I had to relearn it all over again. I've repeatedly gone through that process of recognizing that I'm holding on too tightly and going and getting stressed about it, and having to go, oh, that's right, it's not mine, his project, his problem, give it back again. And then a few weeks, few months, few days later, I'm gripping it tighter and tighter, and then I have to give it back again. Repeatedly go through that process, not just with the Hideaway, but with everything in my life. But that shift from control to trusting God, like he knows what he's doing. He's got the overview. He's so clever. He really is so, so clever. And when we can accept that he is a good father that wants good things for us, and his plans are so much higher than ours, even if they don't make any sense to us, we can then begin that shift from control to trust in him. Number 3 for a life built on the rock, faith-led action. So in the year 2000, I came to Manchester for the first time in my life. I went to this festival called Message 2000, which is a partnership between the Message Trust and Soul Survivor. And they brought thousands of young Christians to Manchester. And we all camped together in Heaton Park. And in the mornings, we went to the Manchester Arena. And in the afternoons, we went out on mission. And then there was a big concert in the evening. And I was about 19 at the time. And I'd never heard of any of it before. It was totally last minute. I didn't even know what I was coming to. But that week changed my life. And it changed my life because in the mornings, I heard teaching that I'd never really heard before. Been in church my whole life, but I'd never really heard it. And I can't remember a single thing that was actually said, but I could summarize it like this. It went, if this God stuff is real, and this faith stuff really does change lives, then it is the most important thing in the world. And if it's the most important thing in the world, why would I put anything else at the center of my life for the rest of my life? Why would I? And I decided there and then it was the most important thing. It was true. And I have strived for the rest of my life to live by that, to put him at the center, to put what he wants for me, his choices for my life, his decisions in all things that I do in that center. And build my life on the rock in that way. And when we do that, it affects all our choices, it affects all our decisions, it affects how we serve, what we do with our time, what we do with our money, what we do with our relationships, how we conduct them, how we treat people. It means constantly testing our own motivations, and it means making choices that might be different to sometimes what we'd like to do. Building a life on the rock means that your faith matters enough to orient your whole life around it. It's central. Every part, holding nothing back. God as priority, number 1. When the Hideaway ended and the charity suddenly ended unexpectedly, I had a number of conversations with some different Christian leaders, 3 different Christian leaders, 2 quite high profile, and all 3 said the same thing, which was really interesting. And they all basically said, in one way or another, I'm amazed that your priorities are still building the kingdom and evangelism. It's amazing. Your faith is amazing. I was like, what are you talking about? It was as though, and these are people that are prominent Christian leaders, like, what? And it was as though it was an expectation that because my charity had collapsed, my faith would automatically collapse with it. And my response was simply that the Hideaway was gone, but God had not changed. He was no less good than he was. He's no less faithful than he was. Why should my faith and priorities change just because the charity and the circumstances around that changed? And I realized afterwards, when I reflected on that, it's because there are so many charities in similar situations where the charity's gone and the faith of the leader has gone with it. I could think of lots of examples where that's been the case. You know, organizations have gone and then the leaders just kind of fallen away or backslid and lost their faith and stuff. If your life is built on the sand, if it's built on anything other than God, if it's your identity and your life is built on your charity or your business or your relationship or the stuff that you own or your status or your power or your followers, when the storms come and those things inevitably collapse, because everything gets hit by a storm at some one time or another, doesn't it? Your faith will go with it. It's as simple as that. Number 4, motivated by integrity over appearance. So integrity. So that's like being honest, but integrity is about the person that you are in private being the same person that you are in public. And building a life on the rock means living a life of integrity. Look at how many Christian leaders over recent years have seen their ministry and their lives, everything they've built, come crashing down because they lacked integrity. Because the person that they were on stage, the person they spoke about, and the life that they declared that you should have and they appeared to have was not the way that they conducted themselves in private. It's endless, isn't it? The list is endless. The problem with integrity is that it's hard to prove. The whole point of things that are done in secret and in your private life is that they're secret. People don't necessarily see them. So integrity for a long time sits between you and the Lord. Until things become public knowledge, it's between you and God. Is the person that we are in public on a Sunday morning the person that we are during the week? The interesting thing about a life that's genuinely motivated by integrity over appearance is that you don't need to tell everyone every good thing that you've done. Doing what's right is more important than telling people about it. People with integrity can celebrate others. And people with integrity are comfortable being misunderstood. So when you live for appearance, when what it looks like to everybody else, and you spend, it is the most important thing, and you spend a lot of time and energy trying to control that narrative, trying to make sure that people see you in a certain way, control what they think of you. Think of certain world leaders, maybe, no names, that are very, very worried about how they're perceived and need to tell everybody everything that they've done. When you live for integrity, you can accept that not everyone needs to see or understand all of your decisions, and that's okay. So an example for this, of this for me recently has been experiencing something I've never experienced before, actually, which is like negative comments on social media or in the community. Because people like to gossip, don't they? The charity's ended, people love to gossip. And I've read comments that people have made over months ago, and even in the past week, to be honest, accusing basically me of mismanagement, of theft, of stealing charity funds, of owning lots and lots of houses, taking charity money to own lots of houses. I mean, some of the things I've heard are quite comical, to be honest. And my immediate response to those things in some ways actually surprised me a little bit, because I think if you told me that was going to happen, I would imagine that my gut reaction would be, I need to correct it all. I need everyone to believe the truth. And the reality is, as I've read those things, I've just kept on scrolling. Because the people that have made those comments don't know me. They don't know the charity. They don't know anything about how to run a charity, or what the law says or what is required. They're making ignorant or deliberate false statements, gossiping, Chinese whispers. I've been able to do that because I know the truth. I know, and the people that know me know the truth as well, importantly. And most importantly, God knows the truth. He knows every in and out, every little detail. I don't need to correct. I don't need to defend myself online. I don't need to get into arguments about these comments because I don't need to care what these strangers think or say because my life is built on the rock and integrity is of the utmost importance to me. And if anyone ever actually went searching and looked into it, they would see that that is the case. But actually, the reality is they don't want the truth, do they? They want the gossip. So there's no point. Number 5, stability in the storm and long-term resilience. In 2019, we'd been open a little while and it had been tough. It'd been really hard. I'd learned everything was new. I didn't know how to do anything. And, we went to it, no idea what we were doing really. We were just doing what we believed God had called us to do. And on the 19th of December, 2019, I got a letter from the Charities Commission rejecting our application to be a charity. And it was hours before our staff Christmas party. And for me, that was a final straw. I read this, I couldn't take it anymore. I went into the toilets at the Hideaway and cried. I went home, I borrowed Sally's car and I ran away. I just went. I didn't tell Andy where I was going. I didn't tell anybody where I was going. I'm not saying I wasn't planning to come back, but that was just my instinct. I can't take this anymore. And I just ran. It was too big for me, too hard, too much to take. And I went to my parents' house and I just stayed there and I just hid there. I didn't even tell them why. I just turned up and they just looked after me and loved me. And immediately after the charity ended, this time around, I was at a meeting with the GPs, actually. The doctors were all there, MP and the council, about the closure and about how it would affect the community. And at the end of the meeting, my doctor, who was at the meeting, he said to me, with all of this to manage, how are you sleeping? And I paused and I thought about it and I said, actually managing the charity hasn't really kept me awake for years. And he went, how? How is that possible? And I realized that somewhere through the years of running Hidden Treasure, that I'd gone from someone who couldn't take the pressure and just ran away to someone that mostly could just sleep through the storm. Because the pressure didn't get any less, let me tell you, it grew and it grew and it grew year on year. In Matthew chapter 8:23, it says this, suddenly, Jesus got into the boat and started across the lake with his disciples, and suddenly a fierce storm struck the lake, with waves breaking into the boat, but Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went up and woke him, shouting, Lord, save us, we're going to drown. And Jesus responded, why are you afraid? You have so little faith. And then he got up and he rebuked the wind and waves, and suddenly there was a great calm. The disciples were amazed. Who is this man, they asked. Even the winds and waves obey him. I can't pinpoint a time when I moved from a place of running away to a place of trust and ability to sleep through the storm. But I think that little by little over the years, I saw, when I look back and I saw God's faithfulness, I saw the things that he'd done and I could reflect and I could think, that was amazing that he did that and he fixed that bit. And you can so often at the time not see God in things. And then when you look back, you just see his hands all over everything. And I think I did that a lot. And through big things and small things, it grew. My trust grew, my faith grew, and my ability to have peace in that storm grew. A life built on the rock means that when the storm comes, you have a strong and solid anchor. And when things fail, and when things collapse, and when things go wrong, you don't get tossed about by the wind and waves. You don't self-destruct, and you don't just run away. The sixth thing that I wanted to share this morning, that I think it looks like to have a life built on the rock, is going at a sustainable pace over burnout. So let me ask you a question. How do you usually relate to God? So what I mean is, how do you mostly see him? What does your relationship kind of look like primarily? Um, is he a king to you? Do you relate to him as sort of a gentle father? Is he a teacher? Is he a lover? Is he just a helpful friend? Just a helpful friend? Is he a helpful friend? Because his character has so many facets, doesn't it? And the way that we can relate to him can look so different. And sometimes because of our own baggage, we can struggle to see him one way, but find it easier to see him another way. I know lots of people, for example, that have not had a great example of a father and have struggled to see God as a loving father because their earthly example of a father was not loving. So how do you see God primarily? How do you relate to him? In my world, mostly, I think my default relationship with God is kind of functional. Like in my world, he's the boss. He's like my manager. He's the king, he's in charge. There's reverence and I love him and I'm a little bit scared of him. But my default attitude is that much is required when much is received. There's no time to waste. We just need to work together, crack on, fifth gear's work to be done. And when years ago, I was on Eden in Salford, and I did that for 7 years. And at the end of 7 years on Eden in Salford, I was completely and utterly burned out. I was angry, I was broken, I was hurt by my church leader, I was struggling to forgive a man who tried to kill me, and I couldn't really separate the idea of a relationship with God from the feeling of complete exhaustion. Those two for me would just became the same thing. And to the extent that I just didn't want a relationship with him because he might ask me to do things and have nothing left. And through that time, God needed to do some serious work to restore me, and he needed to repair a lot of hurt, and he needed to teach me who I was and remind me who he is again. And we had to go back to basics, breaking everything down, starting again. And honestly, it was a lot of work. It was quite painful, and it took a long time. The last couple of years for me, well, for us actually, have been really, really hard. I've been so far beyond exhausted. I would say I probably hit burnout a couple of years ago, truthfully, and just kept going. Much of our lives have been stressed and fed up, disillusioned, a bit joyless, angry, a bit short-tempered and frustrated, often grumpy, very critical, often not particularly nice to be around, if I'm truthful. And it's been really hard, really, really hard. And when things finally came to a halt and the keys were handed over and the email addresses were gone and my titles were gone and all the madness stopped, I had time to finally sit and pray and process a bit. And because of the way that I see God, and because of my previous experience at the end of Eden, I wasn't really looking forward to this. It kind of felt like a leaving interview that I was avoiding. I kind of felt like, what was he going to say? How much have I let the boss down? Is he going to tell me it was my fault? Have I done bad? Did I get it really wrong? Was I just not up to it? I was a bit scared, if I'm honest. And a few different friends sent me the message version of this famous Matthew 11 passage, which I remember well because I remember Sally giving me this same passage many, many years ago, and I just didn't get it. This is the message version, and it says, "Are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn to live freely and lightly." The truth is that as I've prayed and I've spent time with Jesus following the closure of the charity, this passage and those unforced rhythms of grace is something that I'm coming to understand and experience in a way that I just never have before. God, who I usually see as the boss, has just been so, so gentle. and so kind. And I've learned to relate to him and experienced him in a whole new way. He's been a loving father, just looking after me, letting me rest, and letting me eat, and just letting me recover. No bashing, no telling off, no sense of failure or shame or anything, just rest. And for years I've tried to relate. I love Psalm 23. I love it. You know, the Lord is my shepherd. Everyone knows it, surely. And for years I've tried to relate to the green pastures. He makes me lie down in green pastures, leads me beside still water. And for a while I've had this vision where this was after the charity finished, and as I began to pray, where it was like the whole world around me was just this kind of city that had been built up, and it was moving, and it was 360 degrees all around me, and just the whole thing just kind of collapsed and disappeared into the ground, and I was just left with grass and trees, and it was so unfamiliar. And at first it was really disconcerting, because I'm like, I don't know what to do with this. I know how this bit functions, and I know how to function in this madness of the busyness, but I don't know how to function in a world where there's just grass and a stream and trees. And that's what I've been learning to do. In this season, he's been teaching me to stop and to listen and to just rest in him and to reflect and learn, and he's been restoring my soul. He's been regenerating me. And I'm learning to lay in the green pastures. And I've spent much more time than I have for years just being in his presence and in prayer. And honestly, whenever I do, I just cry, which is highly unlike me. Not with sadness or a sense of failure, but just with joy and thankfulness. And I'm so grateful for who he is and what he's done and what he's taught me. And I'm so grateful for what he's given me. And I'm so blessed to be his child and to be allowed into his presence. And I'm looking forward to whatever's next. Somehow he's restoring my soul and giving me such a grateful, joyful heart. And he is so good. I can testify to that this morning. He is so good and so faithful and so gentle and so kind. So that's the kind of 6 things that I just wanted to share this morning. I guess 6 things that I've learned, or I'm learning, or I'm trying to learn about what it looks like in reality to build a life on the rock. Is it worth it? Absolutely, it's worth it. It's not always fun, and it's not always easy. And none of us are the finished article, and we never will be. Building a life on the rock is an ongoing process, and one day we get it right, and one day we get it wrong. But it takes those intentional, deliberate choices every single day. So there's been a lot in that. There's a lot of different things, and I realized I was writing it that there was a lot more things on my list that I had to take out, to be honest. And I could, easily preach a whole series on all of that. But you've got a snapshot. And I'd love us to respond to that now. Just invite the band to come back up. I'd love us to respond to that in whatever way is appropriate for you. My prayer is that there are aspects of that will have spoken to you, and that the bits of that you'll think, I'm nailing that. And then bits that you think, oof, I know I've got work to do on that. I know God wants to speak to me about that. And if you struggle with your identity, if you know that fear of failure or fear of man holds you back, and you need Jesus to reveal himself to you in a new and deeper way, then please, we're going to pray. We invite you to come forward for prayer. Do you want to play some? We invite you to come forward for prayer. We'd love to just pray with you and just pray that